Elias Vance was a man carved from the rugged, silent mountains he called home. His ranch, the Sentinel, was perched on a remote mesa in the Arizona Territory, a harsh, isolated place that suited his solitary nature. He had come west years ago seeking nothing more than quiet and the freedom to raise his cattle without the interference of men or governments. He was a man of routines, his life measured by the sun, the seasons, and the steady work of the land. His existence was defined by separation from the encroaching white settlements and, crucially, separation from the volatile, desperate world of the dwindling Apache tribes who still claimed the canyons below. Elias maintained a strict neutrality, viewing both sides of the conflict with a wary indifference. This meticulously constructed wall of isolation came crashing down on a sweltering, windless afternoon. He was mending fence on the far edge of his property when he found her. She was collapsed in the deep shade of a granite outcrop, clearly having ridden until her horse gave out, the animal nowhere in sight. She was Apache, no older than her early 20s, dressed in travel-worn buckskin, her long, dark hair matted with sweat and dust. What struck Elias immediately was not her heritage, but the look in her eyes, a ferocious, unyielding will staring out from a face etched with pain and desperation. She was injured, a deep, ragged cut across her upper arm, still bleeding slowly. Elias approached her slowly, hands held open, speaking softly in Spanish, the only common language he could rely on. "I mean you no harm. I can help." The woman, whose name was Ahnay, did not immediately respond. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, calculated his rifle, his size, and the raw vulnerability of her situation. She was too proud, too desperate to beg. It was the wound that made the decision for her. When Elias offered water, she drank deeply, then allowed him to gingerly examine the wound. He knew he couldn't leave her. The heat would claim her by sundown, and the injury needed immediate tending. He loaded her carefully onto his horse and rode back to the Sentinel. For 3 days, Elias tended Ahnay. His small cabin, usually a sanctuary of silence, was filled with the low, pained sounds of her recovery. He used fire-cured gauze and antiseptic he'd traded for in Tucson, changing her dressings twice a day. He observed the fierce grace of her movements, even in pain, and the stoic refusal to show weakness. She spoke little, offering only terse translations of her name and her condition. Elias, respecting her silence and her pride, asked nothing more. He simply offered refuge, an act of uncalculated compassion born from his own solitary code of decency. On the 4th day, the fever finally broke, and the true purpose of her desperation was revealed. Ahnay sat up, her eyes clear and focused, and she spoke, not in Spanish, but in precise, slightly formal English. "You have saved my life, rancher." Elias merely nodded, pouring her a cup of strong coffee. "It's Elias. You were injured. I help what I find." Ahnay's gaze was unsettlingly direct. "My clan is dying. Not by bullets, but by time. The young men are gone. The blood has grown thin. Our medicine men, our women, we know we are at the end unless we make a choice that defies tradition." She paused, letting the immense gravity of her statement hang in the air. Elias felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. He knew the direction this conversation was heading. "I was injured because I was seeking the answer to this need," Ahnay continued, her voice low and resonant. She studied him, not as a man, but as a biological instrument, a necessary vessel. She saw his strong build, his clear eyes, his clean habits, and the honest solitude of his life. "Your people are strong. My people are strong. We need a bridge." She rose, walking toward him, her movements now fluid and powerful. She stood before him, her eyes looking into his soul. Her next words, though quiet, struck him like a physical blow, demanding an answer that transcended race, culture, and fear. "I choose you to be the father. You will give us the blood we need. You will be the start of our future." The air in the cabin became thick and suffocating. Elias, the man who had sought isolation, was now being offered the most intimate, dangerous, and sacred form of belonging, the chance to become the progenitor of a culture he barely knew. He was being chosen as a solution to extinction. "You ask too much," Elias whispered, stepping back. "I am a rancher. I am white. I do not belong to your world. This is impossible." Ahnay's expression remained unyielding. "You chose to save me, Elias. That act meant you stepped out of your world and into mine. Survival demands impossible choices. Your blood is clean, your spirit is honorable. We do not ask for a father to raise the children, only to conceive them." For the next week, the demand hung between them, a silent, terrifying presence. Elias wrestled with the ethics, the danger, and the sheer audacity of the request. To agree was to willingly surrender his future, to become an operative in a survival plan that defied the laws of both societies. To refuse was to consign a proud people to slow death, a choice his conscience could not easily bear after seeing Ahnay's desperate strength. He saw in her eyes the fierce love for her diminishing people. He realized the question was not about him, but about his purpose. His life had been about avoiding conflict. Now, his purpose was about creating life, bridging the deepest cultural divide with the most fundamental human act. The decision was finally made not by choice, but by event. A dust cloud appeared on the horizon, not the shifting dust of the wind, but the organized cloud of men riding hard. They were a posse from the nearest settlement. Spurred by a missing persons report and the paranoia of the frontier. They were looking for any excuse to provoke conflict with the Apache, and finding a lone rancher harboring an Apache woman would be all the evidence they needed for a massacre. Ahnay saw them first, her hunter's instinct sharper than his. "They come for us both," she stated simply. "If you refuse my offer, you die by their hands, a traitor. If you accept, you choose life, and my people will fight for you." Elias looked at the distant cloud, then at Ahnay. He saw the cold, inevitable violence of the white world closing in, demanding conformity and racial hatred. He looked at Ahnay, who offered a strange, dangerous future of meaning and life. His choice became clear: he would rather risk the unknown future with Ahnay's clan than fall to the predictable prejudice of his own. "I accept," Elias said, his voice firm. "Tell me what we do." Ahnay immediately took charge. She had been preparing. They gathered his rifle, his medical supplies, and as much preserved food as they could carry. They left the sentinel behind, not burning it, but leaving it as a decoy, riding hard into the canyons that Ahnay knew so intimately. They rode for a day, avoiding every known trail, until they reached the hidden, silent heart of Ahnay's clan. The camp was a sanctuary carved deep into the red rock, shielded by ancient magic and modern necessity. The remaining clan members, mostly elders, children, and a handful of young women, observed Elias with the same intense scrutiny Ahnay had shown. The chief, an old, weary man named Taza, greeted Elias not with hostility, but with grim acceptance. He knew this white man represented the clan's last, desperate gamble. The ceremony was simple and profound, conducted under the vast, indifferent stars. Ahnay, standing before the council fire, spoke in her native tongue, but Elias understood the weight of her words. She was affirming her choice, his purpose, and the destiny of their people. The clan gave him a new name, one of honor and utility: Tlish Ndaat, the silver thread, the one who weaves new strength into their frayed lineage. Elias spent the next years living a double life. He was Tlish Ndaat, the silent, respected bridge, the father of renewal, bound by honor and duty to Ahnay and the other women chosen by the council. He was a protector, a hunter, and a teacher, sharing his knowledge of medicine and ranching efficiency with the clan. He was also Elias Vance, the solitary rancher who had disappeared from the white world, leaving behind a scarred reputation and the false trail that the posse would follow for years. He learned the Apache language, their history, and their reverence for the land. His children were born, strong, beautiful, brown-skinned, and green-eyed, proof of the powerful blend of two worlds. He watched them grow, bearing his features and Ahnay's unbreakable spirit, and in them, he found a profound, undeniable sense of belonging. His initial, reluctant acceptance matured into a deep, unshakable commitment. He had willingly stepped away from his simple life to embrace a destiny that was terrifying and sacred. He found that true purpose was not in isolation, but in the ultimate act of connection, giving life and continuity to a dying culture. Years later, sitting by the same fire where Ahnay had made her demand, Tlish Ndaat, the man who was Elias Vance, looked out at the shadows playing on the canyon walls. He was no longer a stranger. He was a father, a warrior, and a vital link in an endless chain of life. He had chosen the impossible purpose, and in doing so, he had become exactly who he was meant to be, a hero not of conflict, but of survival, forever bound to the canyons and the brave, fierce people who had chosen him to be their future.